Yeah. Okay, this is my VCV rack for BEATMAKERS video. Right now, this is just as a respect thing to Lean Lizzie, just to, share some tips, but I might actually make this a video, like a YouTube video. So this is my VCV rack template. This is what I start with just to go from here. And I always route the audio to 3 and 4 on my interface so that I can go out and go to the SP. But I'm going to take this all away and start from scratch. I just wanted to show what I usually start with. The MIDI to CV module, the audio module, clocked because it's just a good clock to use, and then a mixer. And these are all, this is Mixmaster, this is Impromptu. These are all free. I don't think I think the only thing I bought from VCV Rack is the plugin or the module that allows you to use plugins. Other than that, everything here is free. So I'm gonna go ahead and delete all this because we don't need it. We'll just have it. Okay. So you got it set up. You got the audio module and we got MIDI to CV. And then this is big because what I said before is you can get really distracted with all the other modules and shit. There's so many to choose from, especially if you download as much as I have, that it can be hard to tell where to start. And for that reason, I'm going to start with the MIDI to CV module and plug in a MIDI controller. And you know what? I might keep my mouse and just use the QWERTY keyboard. Okay, so let's break down what a synthesizer is. So you have several different components to the synthesizer. And if I had an analog one on me, I'd bring it up right now. And I'm sure, it's easy to know this in theory, of how to make a patch on a synthesizer when it's all laid out in front of you. But then when you don't have the parts, it's hard to tell, what goes to what. So the first thing you have is a source. So whether that's the sequencer or the built-in keyboard on the synthesizer or some sort of other MIDI thing like an Electron, something that could send MIDI out, or a MIDI keyboard. So what this is going to be is our MIDI source, and you have two things. You have volt per octave and gate. You have another whole other set of things you can send MIDI from, but the volt per octave and gate is what's going to be on every keyboard. That's just a very basic thing, because what you're doing when you're working with modules on an analog modular rack is that you're sending voltage from your source to your rack and manipulating the audio source specifically with that electronic pulse, that voltage. So the control voltage is a physical electronic signal in the analog world that's going to manipulate the audio. So we're recreating that with this MIDI to CV module. So volt per octave is your pitch. So if every volt makes an octave in the Eurorack world, that means you send a 6 octave or a 6 volt signal, out to a synthesizer with a volt per octave input. It's going to play whatever note that is. So say 6 volts is going to be like a middle C or something like that. If you play 12 volts, it'll be the highest, pitch you can get. And, 0.1 volts or whatever is going to be the lowest. And then gate is just a signal to say, okay, the gate is open. So from there, the first part of the synthesizer is the oscillator. And we'll start with the VCV rack modules, or I'll do two. I'll do these because the volt are my favorite, but we'll put that aside for now. And we'll do the VCV rack. Okay. So what we have in the VCO, which is a voltage controlled oscillator, it's an oscillator that is going to be controlled specifically by the pulses you send to it. So pitch will be controlled volt per octave by volt per octave. So you would send this volt per octave from a CV source, whether that's the sequencer, the keyboard, the MIDI device, whatever. And the output is right here. It just organizes it white or black. Black is an output, white is an input. So output to input, output to input to device. And that's a sine wave that's actually pretty crushed. Right, so from here, the only thing we can do is control the pitch. So as I play with this keyboard, it's just sending out, all it's doing is sending out a constant analog wave from this module. It's just one, we're pretending it's analog, it's not, it's in the computer, but if this was a rack, it's sending out this frequency just from this VCO module, a constant wave. And the pitch is controlled with the keyboard. So that's why when you go volt to octave to volt to octave, every connection only does one thing. So you're not going to just connect once to here and then be able to play it like a synthesizer. The only way to do that is to have a VCA and an envelope, which could be in the same module or two different modules. So right now, all we have is a constant signal going to our audio output, and we can only change the pitch. Now, to make it a synthesizer, you either have to have, and I'm going to pull up a volt module just to put it to the side. These are all free. I'm just going to wait to use them. You have, let's go down to VCB. So these are the ones that come with it. Okay, you're going to have a VCA and an ADSR. Okay, so VCA, ADSR. Okay, so this is the other part of your synthesizer. This is your envelope section of your synthesizer. You have your oscillator, maybe it's 2 pulses or something like that that you're mixing, or, you know, different waves, if it's like a Moog, you know, whatever. And then you have your envelope section. And when you have it in a synthesizer, all this shit's routed already. So you don't have to worry about it. It's just there, and then you fuck with the envelope. And you usually have 2 envelopes, one for the filter, if it's a subtractive synth, whatever. So what we do here is we use the VCA, which is a voltage-controlled amplifier, to control the amplitude. So right now, it's going to be full, but we put it all the way down, and it's down. It's a slider. You know, it's just controlling the amplitude. So you have your voltage-controlled oscillator going to your voltage-controlled amplifier, and then that is where you're going to, you know, control the sound. But how do you do that? You have to send a envelope to the control voltage input of the VCA. So right now, with it all the way down, nothing's coming out of here. But we take the gate, so we're already controlling pitch with the keyboard. We take the gate and put it into the gate here. Now every time you hit the gate, it's going to send a signal, which is going to trigger this envelope. So right now, you know, we make a little envelope, a little percussive, whatever hit, and then we send this to the CV out here. So I think you have to turn this up. I don't know why the display is looking like that, but right, so when you hit the gate, it's going to generate an envelope, and then send that to the VCA. And then that's pretty much the beginning of the synthesizer. Like, that's the first step, right? And so that's starting to make sense now, that in order to make the sound, you know, rise and fall, attack and decay, you have to send an ADSR to a VCA. Now, some things make this way easier. Basil is a great VCO module. It has a really smooth sound, and you can go straight from that into Slap, which is a VCA and a ADSR together. So this is a hitting envelope. You have your output from the smooth oscillator going into the VCA right here, which is what it says. It might be too small. And then going out to your device, right? So you can also just take this envelope and send it to something else, which we'll do in a second. But right here, you have your And then it's just that easy to make a synthesizer. So you can take this up an octave, whatever, modulate it. And then this is one of my favorite VCO modules. It just sounds nice. And then this is a SP reverb, but that easy, right? But what you can also do is you realize when you have a subtractive synthesizer, you usually have two envelopes, one for the VCA for the amplitude and then one for the filter, because that's just the easiest way to sculpt something, is to have a big fat square wave or something like that and then filter it into something that sounds nicer. And what we can do for that is get a VCF, which is a voltage controlled filter. So here, let's just find, this is a diode filter. Okay, and then this is, right, so this is the input, comes from, whatever the source is. It could be straight from here or it could be from here. And the output is, whatever depth of a curve you want. So if it's you want a steeper slope, 24 decibels, a smoother slope, 6 decibels. You could take the cutoff all the way down. And then here, you're taking the output from the envelope right here that's triggered by the gate. And instead of just using this to control the amplitude of the VCA, you're using that same envelope to control the cutoff of this filter. So you see output of the envelope that's triggered by the gate right here into the filter. So now the filter opens and closes. Now if we don't want this VCA, we can do all of this. Obviously you would have signal running because this is always going to be running without the VCA being closed. There's no gate stop. So this is always going to be running. It's just going to be filtered down. But with that, you can control it. And you could see how, just one quick thing. Cool. Now it's controlling both. And you can see how these cables are fat and these cables going to here are skinny. Oh, wait. Maybe this module, they're going to be fat too. The skinny cables like this and the fat cables are a new thing they did. Not recently anymore. But that just is the difference between polyphonic capable and if it's skinny, that means it's monophonic. And that, that means that in the hardware world, if you have one cable, one connection, one VCO, it's going to be monophonic. That's the only voice. But they took a couple liberties with the digital capabilities to pretend as if, when you send a cable over here, you can press down 4 different keys and it would act as if there's 4 different instances of this. So before, in the first versions of VCRack, you used to literally have to have, each whatever synthesizer be out here and then route and split, whatever. But, so this is basically this is the beginning. And from here, if you just wanted to have this be a synthesizer plugin, which you could do in a DAW or record to an SP or something like that, you can start stacking up effects here and and grab something. This is like a delays and whatever, and give yourself the freedom to really experiment with each of these building blocks. You can swap out the smooth oscillator for a complex oscillator. You can combine 2 and FM them together. You can do different things with, 2 envelopes. One of these envelopes, you can have another one right here that's also triggered by the gate, but that has a different envelope. So this is the envelope for the VCA, but you have a different envelope for the filter. So even though this goes on, it really sounds like this. So even though this sounds like this, right, this is just, this oscillator going into the VCA here, being controlled by this envelope, and then going into a filter with it all the way up, so nothing's really happening. We can do this, turn down the filter, turn up the resonance, and then control the filter with a different envelope. So that's simple. What we can do from here, though, and this is why people use modular in the first place, is not necessarily to control something with a keyboard. Most people don't really buy a whole Eurorack and then just use it to play a complex synthesizer. Some people do, and that's a lot of what I use this for, is just to play around with the sound, do sound design in here, and then send it into the SP and then resample it, whatever. What you can also do is use sequencers to come up with new or to have it play as a patch, right? So in order to do that, we're going to need a sequencer. This is a really simple one, so I'm doing this, and a clock source, and that's why I always have clocked in my first patch, right? So what this is going to do is take the volt per octave and gate equation from the MIDI to CV module. We don't need that anymore. We're going to get time from here that we can send gates. So this, you could set a clock here and then you can have it divided. That's why I like this, because it gives you 3 divisions. So you can have the clock plus a quarter clock. And what that looks like is this. This is the clock times 1. And when it's running, it's running. And so it's going to send a steady pulse that's going to run the sequencer. If you did it divided by 4, you see it sends one on quarter notes of, or quarter notes divided by, it's like whole beats of 110. But so from here, this is just a great sequencer to use because it has this random function. You can set it to be quantized to a scale, C sharp minor, and hit random. And now what this is going to do is every time the clock beats, it's going to send out a gate, which you can send here, and a volt per octave that you send to your oscillator. Right, and now this is monophonic mode, but we can turn the polyphony up. So now every time these notes play, they'll be quantized to C sharp minor and send out chords. And of course this isn't really useful, but then you can see, look at all the different types of sequencers and effects to go from here. Now that you have the basics, from here you can get way more creative. And I'm looking, some of these are new. I haven't been using this as much recently as I should. All different types of space. This is a convolver, reverb. You can have different convolutions. You can go effects from here, like clouds is a popular hardware module. This is like an emulation of it. It's like a granular effect. A lot of where I got this from too is, or just how to use this, was from Omri Cohen on YouTube, and he loves volt modules, and he loves this sequencer, which is Entropria. You send it a clock, and then these control the pitch. And you see, the more cool and creative and fucking goofy these modules are, the more it doesn't, like, it makes it difficult to use them. Oh, what the hell? Okay. Oh, this is just on run. Okay, this is the clock. See, now it's going around here. And so you have 2 sequencers. You have this ring, and then you have this ring out here. So if you have two different sequences, you can have two different things going on here, right? And then use these probability knobs in between to make it say, okay, half the time you're going to play this one, half the time you're going to play this one. So just with what we have right now, this is already more than you can do in most DAWs with just the stock synthesizer functions. And you can see like how much more creative you can get here. So you can have, these are completely random pitches that I'm just choosing that aren't quantized to any specific pitch. And if you wanted to quantize them, you could put in a quantization module like this, quantum, and then take the volt per octave output from here, and then, you know, assign it, say, all the black keys. So now it's going to quantize whatever these pitches are to this C sharp major pentatonic scale, or mine, I don't remember which one it is, whatever it is. And then, if you have an interface, you can go 3-4 out like this. You can then go. Very cool stuff. Very cool stuff. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. I mean, that's how I use it, and of course you can go even deeper. And I think Omri Cohen is a good source because he's a sort of experimental musician. So he, you know, is never really going to sit here with the MIDI keyboard and make a sound or do something really simple. But just with, you know, 9 or so modules, we've made a really fucking cool and unique sequence, and that's why I like using this. And then if you wanted to, if you were a guy that was like, I'm an experimental electronic musician, I just want to make a cool patch, you can keep adding modules, and there's nothing really going to stop you from, besides your CPU power, from getting crazy with this. Because if once you put in a mixer, you know, you have this going to one channel on the mixer, then you have a whole nother patch for different sequences playing at the same time, a whole nother patch for drums that are being sequenced. You put that all in a mixer, you can have a song just right here. And that's fun to do. You could spend a whole day doing that, and it's like a meditation. It's like the best day ever. So this is just like a start of basics for someone that makes beats, makes other type of music that isn't like a modular head, but that wants to utilize this as a tool. And it's fucking all free. All this shit's free. So yeah, check out Omri Cohen for more. And I'm going to clean this up and post it. But thanks, Lane Lizzie, for giving me a reason to do this, because I've wanted to for a while. Bet.